Catholic author.
And welcome, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. And it's great to be with you today to jump into this thing we call Apologetics. That is defending the faith with clarity, charity, and confidence. Got an awesome show in store for you today. After all, it is 9/11, and that often, that anniversary calls to mind a lot of incompatible thoughts and worldviews with the Judeo-Christian, and so now we confront worldviews outside of the sphere of Western Christianity, but also inside as well, because it's also political season, so we're hit with all sorts of isms. You have socialism, you have liberalism, progressivism, all these different isms, and what are they? Are they compatible with it, or are they in conflict with the Judeo-Christian principles? Well, we're going to have our guest coming up on the other side of the break is going to be Troy Guy. Troy, as you know, is a nuclear engineer and a convert to the Catholic faith, and he's exactly what is and what is not compatible. That's fun, and as always, we are after all, our minds in politics, go through informal fallacy, except for Friday. And the Friday, we usually exchange a informal fallacy for a propaganda technique. And of course, election season, that becomes even more important than ever, because we're always being with today's early father is Saint Hippolytus of Rome, a very interesting and also a pretty important early church father indeed in terms of apologetics. So plate, with all sorts of goodies. But before we jump into feasting, a couple announcements. I just want to remind everybody that the Apocrypha Apocalypse has begun. Yes, I have opened my channel on YouTube, and I'm publishing videos periodically about the Old Testament canon, because Protestants are missing 7 books in their Bibles that are found in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles. And there's all sorts of very interesting, potentially explosive, information about how these books ended up being taken out of our separated brethren's Bible. So I'm basically producing and periodically premiering a whole bunch of videos that will cover that ground, so that it will be out there for people. I've written several books on the subject, but you can reach a lot more people, I think, with videos. So please keep that project in your prayers, and check it out too. Just go to the search engine on YouTube, type in Apocrypha Apocalypse, and that way you can check it out. And please subscribe or like if you like it, and that helps visibility. But that's the whole name of the game, is visibility. And so not only subscribe to that, but also, especially if you like the show, please do Apologetics in Place. If you haven't subscribed, please do. We completely appreciate it. It helps us with visibility. Also, give us a like or whatever, add comments, do all those social media type doodads that you do there, and we truly appreciate it. Let's see. Anything else I'm forgetting? I know I'm forgetting something. I don't think so. Oh, I want to give my shout-outs. How can I forget my shout-outs? As always, I want to welcome all of you on board. The dojo's a very welcoming place, because we're all on the same team here in the dojo. So welcome aboard, everybody watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello. Great to see familiar names there. And also, I want to welcome all of you listening on radio around the country and via podcast around the world through our handy dandy phone. And okay, that would be terrible if I forgot my shout outs, because I don't want to give the impression that you're not welcome. That's why I'm here. Okay, let's jump into the finding fallacy, which I said is the propaganda technique. It's called negative and positive lies. This isn't something you typically find on propaganda technique lists, but I thought it was interesting because it divides lying into two different kind of categories, which we normally don't think about. And of course, those categories are the negative lies and the positive lies. And negative lies are spreading negative lies about opposing individuals or groups, increasing the chance of failure when their supporters believe the lies and abandon them. So this is part of a general misinformation or disinformation campaign, perhaps to avoid being tainted with the same brush, so on and so forth. So negative lies are really a form of attack, seeking to diminish the other person. And like I said, it is election season here in America, so yes, we are very familiar with that. But, there's also what's called positive lies in the field of propaganda. And positive lies is spreading positive lies about enemies or groups that you support, increases their chance of success when people accept fake news as truth. Okay, so in other words, positive lies are lies about yourself or groups that are friendly to yourself in order to bolster support for them. And of course, the opposite would be negative lies, which is to attack enemies with lies. So, it goes back and forth. And I think, just like with sin, lying is a sin. There are sins of omission and commission, right? You guys remember your Baltimore catechisms. And the same thing's true with lies. Lies can not only be fabricating something that's not true, but technique is being used on you. It's meant to disappear. So you guys are armed and ready. Can't, at least as far as. All right. So let's jump to our Meet the Early Church Father for today. Pretty important early church father, very interesting early church father, St. Hippolytus of Rome, who died AD 235. St. Hippolytus is the first anti-pope and the only one of the 2 or 3 dozen anti-popes of various titles to whom the church accords the title sanctus or saint in honors of the honors of the altar. Beyond a few, by the way, an anti-pope isn't someone who opposes a pope per se. What it is, illegitimate claim to papal throne. Okay, so there is a validly elected pope, and another person says maybe some cardinals make their own little conclave, and they say, "Hey, we elect this guy as pope." That illegitimate pope would be known as an anti-pope. Just FYI. I'm not sure if Jurgens gets into that, but I wanted to clear that up. Though we first met him in Rome, his entire career is connected with that city, and there's every reason to believe that he was not Roman by birth, and that his origins are other than Latin, interesting enough. It may, in fact, be taken as certain that he was from the East, and as a near certainty that he had Alexandrian connections. For he exhibits knowledge of Greek philosophy, and his theological attitudes betray a dependence upon Alexandrian thought. Now, Hippolytus came into conflict with Pope St. Celestius, taking an extremely rigorous view in the question of the reconciliation and readmission of sinners. When Callistus was taking an attitude that may have been shown an unaccustomed lenience, elected Bishop of Rome, Hippolytus by a small group of devoted followers, became the first anti-pope in the time of Callistus, which was between 217 222, and his schism continued through 3 reigns of Pope St. Urban I and Pope St. Pontius until 235 AD. In the latter year, both Pontius and Hippolytus were exiled by the emperor to Sardinia. Pontius resigned his see in September of 235 AD, and in order to enable the Roman Church to elect his successor, possibly Hippolytus did the same. In any case, both he and Pontius seems to have reconciled with each other in Sardinia, where both died soon as martyrs. The schism at an end already in 235 AD. The united community elected Pope St. Anturus, who reigned from 235 to 236, whose successor, Pope St. Fabian, 236-250, brought the bodies of both martyrs from Sardinia to Rome. Hippolytus' literary activity is quite prodigious, almost as extensive as Origen's, and that says a lot, folks, because Origen has written quite a bit. Let's see, there's a bunch of other information. His works on the Antichrist and also commentary on Daniel. Very, very important work. And, man, time's over. But coming up next, Troy Guy.
If you shop on Amazon.com, there's an easy way to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Just visit smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center under the desired charity. Now, when you log into your Amazon account and purchase products, a portion of it will automatically go to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio at no cost to you. Thanks in advance for supporting CRC and VMPR. And may God richly bless you and your family.
Pro-life across America, the Billboard people.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy? Or will it be a girl?
We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat, and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president? Or maybe a doctor?
Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Marianne Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-life across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, Hands-on Apologetics. Well, hey, you know, like I said, it's 9/11, it's election season, and we are, as Catholics, faced with all sorts of various thoughts and ideologies, and which ones are compatible, which ones aren't, why are they incompatible, like socialism, liberalism, progressivism, ism, you know, fill in the blankism. to help us work through that is our good friend Troy Guy. Troy, by the way, is a nuclear engineer and convert to the Catholic Church. He's the author of a new book, Evangelical Catholic, A Journey Through the Biblical and Historical Evidence That Led Yet Another Evangelical Protestant to the Apostolic Church. And he has a fantastic website. Check it out. It's discoverhischurch, all one word, .com. And Troy Guy, welcome to Hands On Apologetics.
Hi, Gary. Great to be with you. Great to be with your listeners.
Yeah, hey, it's great to have you on board. How is life treating you?
We are blessed, Gary. The kids are homeschooling, until school starts again, and we're looking forward to the day they actually return to class. So there'll be a little less hectic around the house. It's a bit of a zoo right now.
Yeah, and I know you're not alone either, because my wife is a public school teacher, so she's actually teaching online, and that's a huge change. Troy. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How have you been? How's your family?
Oh, we're doing well. It's the usual chaos, and that's kind of how it's been for. For a long, long time. So we're doing good. Thanks be to God. So this is an interesting topic. When you proposed it to me, I thought, that's, I don't think in the show we really instigated. So once you start off, do we
find out interest in socialism. Who wouldn't want that? Same thing in college too. The idea that socialism solves the poverty, socialism, or capitalism's not working for our young people. Some people are saying that, hey, socialism solves the great inequality, right? That inequality is one of the greatest problems of humanity. And why is that? Because to them, suffering comes as a result of this unequal distribution of material things. And of course, Gary, we know that is socialism. And we'll define it more formally in a minute, but socialism, the idea that we redistribute material things to those who have not from those who have is not a biblical idea. In fact, opposite of that is our Christian faith. It says that suffering is a result of this inequality in material, that our salvation suffering comes from our sin and our separation from the love of God through our sin and through Jesus' life and death for us. So when we don't have that, we have a peace that we can never solve through a socialistic idea. But I think that it's important to recognize that the popularity of socialism is really hitting our young generation, with guarantees of jobs, with an entitlement mentality that we see. It's the old, I deserve this and that, so authentic work ethic declines. And, of course, this comes from indoctrination that so many of our secular universities are using, and that they've kicked out this biblical worldview. And so we get this socialistic attraction from so many of our young people. Yeah, and I think too, Gary, that one of the things that's important here is that those of us within the church, we have a responsibility to gently and lovingly, I believe, reverse these trends and to deal with these isms, as you pointed out, in our society. We have to promote the church's social doctrines and protect the very violation of human rights, which is really the right to self. And I think that I like whenever Pope St. John Paul said that man can't have public life. And here, I think, Gary, is that the Catholic Church has always socialism, always condemned socialistic in every form. And that's why one of the newest books, and I highly recommend be a socialist. He did a fantastic job, and I think when he pointed out that between 1840s or so to mid 1900s, there were 8 major encyclicals that actually condemned socialism and communism, and more followed from that. So when we talk about these isms, we have to keep that in mind, that it is our job to get out and to be an active member in politics and to vote in a well-formed conscience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're here for. Why God made us lay people, right? Is to sanctify the temporal order, to bring holiness and order into a very unholy, usually, area of politics. Troy, I think one of the most attractive things about, or why socialism catches on, is because it really does kind of purport to be give a panacea, a paradise. If you only become socialist and the government over stuff, everything is perfect. There won't be equity. Every will have all these opportunities that otherwise they couldn't have. That's kind of hard to break, isn't it? Because it's like it's kind of fantasy based almost.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's a very utopian view, but I think it's so important to realize that this utopian view, this part of secularism, material is everything, religious life from public. It's made up of atheism, divine law. I mean, there's a militant anti-Christian view involved. You have a progressive view, which is, again, a utopian view that tries to redefine what the nation is. And more importantly, Gary, I think the role of the family is redefined in some of this. You've got liberalism out there in the strictest form. You've got relativism that says, hey, there's no absolute truths. There's no absolute moral issues. In fact, to them, truths are replaced by opinion polls, and this is exactly what we're seeing today. So really, socialism has components of secularism, atheism, relativism, liberalism. It's all bound up in this government control of our economy and our property. And I think we would do well to go ahead and define, there's been so many surveys out there that what is socialism to you? And they ask, 15-year-olds, they ask 20-year-olds, they ask 25-year-olds, and you get a different view of what we're calling socialism. And so I think a great place for us to define it.
Yeah. Why don't we do that?
Okay. One of the universal understood and agreed upon definitions of socialism is that it is a political and economic system. Okay, it's a society in which the government owns the means of production of goods and services. And so as a result, you get this large government, you get direct governmental control of our goods, our services, our economy. And why would that be important? Why as Catholics, do we care about this? It sounds good, let the government control it, we're going to be taken care of, because you see, who's controlling what is very, very important in our lives. Who's and so that's kind of opposite of what we would call capitalism, right? We've got traditionally defined capitalism as this free market system where, we have private ownership of property, and so we control the means of production. So in capitalism, it's based on supply and demand. There's more demand, we supply more, and vice versa. But socialism is based on the government-commanded edicts. And that's important because then, again, who's controlling what's important to us? And I think later on in the program, we'll get to exactly why this is important to every single Catholic, that we understand the difference between socialism and a capitalistic view.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head because, what's the goal of the state, under a socialist outlook? Really, the goal of the state is its own preservation and welfare, which means that its citizens become kind of like the means to an end, where the state looks at citizens as a kind of commodity within its own system, rather than people made in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah, amen. And I think that goes back to that individual, as God's creation, we're individually important with individual gifts. And certainly we'll get to that too later in the program, why that's so central, that we're not treated all the same, that we're not all exactly equal. We don't have the exact same incomes. We don't have the exact same gifts. And this, of course, is a communistic, socialistic idea that is in the infant stages of being born, not only in America, but around the world. It already is born. And so I think it's very important that as we move to the polls to vote, that what are we voting for? Principles upon which we are. And so I think socialism is out of every form.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, boy, there's just so much. It's interesting how, depending on age, how people look at it differently. Because you're young, you probably don't remember the Soviet Union and socialism in its heyday, but it wasn't. It was anything but a paradise. And I think since that has ceased to be as popular, that there's kind of a collective memory loss about exactly how this works out in principle. I hear the music coming up, Troy. Maybe we'll just pause it right there. We'll start on the other side. We're chatting with Troy Guy and talking about focusing on socialism. Stay tuned, folks. More to come on the other side of the break.
Join VMPR live on YouTube September 12th, 2020 for our latest free conference, The Ultimate Challenge. This exclusive virtual event will feature a brand new talk from Jesse Romero, How Apologetics Brought Me Back to Faith, plus never-before broadcast video presentations from Father Mitch Pacwa, Dr. Scott Hahn, and the late, great Father Benedict Groeschel.
And the question is, how do you understand the words of Jesus? This is my body. Not this bread is my body, but this is my body. This is the cup of my blood. And may I state categorically and emphatically that you cannot understand it. It is a mystery.
Go to vmpr.org to register now and get ready to face the ultimate challenge.
Absolutely mysterious.
Sirach 11:24 says, "Do not say, I am self-sufficient. What harm can come to me now?" According to St. Catherine of Siena, presumption is like vermin burrowing at the root of the tree of our soul. If we do not uproot it with great care and humility, it will eventually destroy the soul. May God keep us from all presumption of mind and heart, and realize that we depend on Him for everything.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We are chatting with our good friend, nuclear engineer and convert Troy Guy of DiscoverHisChurch.com, talking about isms and especially socialism. And Troy, I found it interesting that different people of different ages have different understandings of what exactly socialism is.
Yeah, they do. And, like I said, the definition classically is this political system where the government owns the means of production, and therefore they own...
Jesus said in Luke 17, "When you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, we are unprofitable servants. We have only done our duty." According to St. John of the Cross, God is pleased with the little deeds we do in secret. He takes more pleasure in these than in a multitude of grand works that we may do out of the desire to be seen by others. May God help us to do the things that please Him, and not just to appear great in the eyes of others.
Troy, yeah, I think Matt Arnold had an important message. They interrupted you. Would you mind starting over again?
Actually, I loved it. That's awesome. Amen to that. I wanted to go. That's awesome. We could all take that one. One thing you said, Gary, I think kind of going back to the Soviet Union, USSR, Russia, for a long time I worked classified programs for the U.S. government, specifically aimed at protecting our country against nuclear bombardment and also keeping our nuclear arsenal up to snuff. I can't go into that, but the point is that I saw firsthand behind doors of what the USSR and the Soviet Union had aimed at us because of this communistic, socialistic idea. And none of it is pretty, but all of it comes out of this very atheistic, controlistic, socialistic, government-owned production. And I saw that firsthand as a scientist at the laboratory. So I totally agree that it comes out of there. But, that kind of brings us to the point of the two founders of socialism and communism are Karl Marx, of course, and Friedrich Engels of the 19th century. Late, the 1800s they lived, but both of them were philosophers. Both of them were social revolutionaries. Both of them were sociologists and journalists, and you can think of them as kind of rogue political activists. But where we come in is at Karl Marx, when he wrote this Communist Manifesto and equated communism with socialism. In fact, he used those terms interchangeably. But I think important to our point here is that Karl Marx kind of defined for us the stake in the ground when it comes to this socialistic view. And he said,
Leviticus 11:44 says, "Consecrate yourselves and be holy, because I am holy." St. Vincent Pallotti said, "You must be holy in the way God asks you to be holy." God does not ask you to be a Trappist monk or a hermit. He wants you to sanctify the world and your everyday life.
Join VMPR live on YouTube September 12th, 2020 for our latest free conference, The Ultimate Challenge. This exclusive.
Okay, so and again, a very important message, but that he basically made a line on the ground in regards to socialism and communism.
Yeah, so that's the whole Karl Marx, this abolition of private property. And that's what it boils down to. And here's where, an instance, if you will, where this socialism comes into conflict with not only Catholic teaching and the Bible and the law, because ownership of private property is actually a natural right. And that's why we see Pope Leo XIII, for example, saying socialism, look, he says socialism is contrary to the natural right to own property, and it must be utterly rejected. And so I think it's so important that, we realize as Catholics and Christians around the world that the papal magisterium has spoken loud and clear on the errors of socialism. And when you realize that every pope since 1849 has released these major encyclicals or letters condemning socialism, that it's an intrinsically an evil, that means, an evil in of itself, we have to start asking, are we accepting forms of it or are we rejecting it? And I think, one of the practical ways it comes in is socialism really promotes the persecution of the church and the persecution of Christians. It's a well-bought story. The church believes God is the highest authority. We believe that as Christians. He's our king. He's our father. And so when we profess that truth and live our lives accordingly, we got to realize that naturally is going to run, against socialism and certainly communism, because they tell us that our higher order is the government and its ownership of our goods and services. So Christians are naturally segregated, and so you see this socialistic theology almost in every country it's been tried. It suppresses Catholic faith. Christians, they're non-Catholics around the world. Speech is censored. We see that even in America today. Prayers banned. We certainly see that in communistic countries. Socialism, it bans worship. We see that in places like Sweden. You can't homeschool your children. Faith is heavily scorned. You have all of these reasons why it impacts us as Catholics. But I think, Gary, if I may, I think some people are saying, okay, look, I know socialism really hits us hard in certain ways, but what is a practical way that it would impact my life and my work and my economics? In that, you can look no further than incentive. I mean, incentive is a huge flaw within socialism. Because socialism's mandated equality and their mandated wealth can never really incentivize people to do the most difficult jobs. And, it's intuitive, it's natural. And so when we think about it, would you want to get paid the same amount of money whether you cleaned urinals or you cleaned a window for the day? So you have this idea that with mandated equality, who's going to do those less desirable jobs? And so I think it's so important that some people are going to be forced to work extremely undesirable jobs, ultimately against their will. And so back to your point of the utopia, we hear that socialism, creates this utopia, in fact, but we see that it in fact sets up a form of social slavery that's not biblical at all. Another, and this is off the top of my head, unequal wages. That's a big point of socialism because they claim that that's the source of poverty, this unequal wages. But unequal wages, as in capitalism, actually produces very naturally the incentives for people to fulfill jobs that they go out and work for. And again, it's so important to realize that we have God-given gifts. And so obviously the suppression of our God-given gifts and talents is a system, again, in agreement with Pope Leo XIII, for example, should be utterly rejected. Yeah, very well put. So, Troy, many times people will just respond where, you point out all these examples of failure that you gave. They'll say, well, that's socialism could work. It's just bad people tried it. It's just a question of finessing the system and modernizing it, and and then it will work perfect. What would you say to that? Well, I would say let's look at countries that have already tried it. That's certainly a myth. People say, well, what about places like Sweden? What about other places that have tried it? Aren't they socialistic successes? They're good people, right? It's kind of working over there. It's kind of a welfare state thing going on. But we have to remember, for Christians, this doesn't work because places like, for example, Sweden, it's really not a socialistic success at all. It's not for many reasons. One of them, and I kind of alluded to this before, is on a very practical level. The parents are forbidden from homeschooling their children, Gary. Parochial schools are also forbidden. Why? Because of the socialistic agenda and oversight of the government. And so for Catholics and other Christians, it's really devastating to our religious faith and education. Even though they may be well-intended, as you point out, now the government is educating your children. A religious education, conducted by our parents is outlawed. Can you imagine this? Yeah. And again, it really implies that the government will teach our children what they want them to learn, which, of course, we realize, and I think we have to admit, is very often an anti-Catholic proposition. So Sweden's not a good example. It's really a welfare state. But I would also say, Gary, let's look at Venezuela. It's a very well-known, I think everybody understands this example probably better than anybody else. If you look at Venezuela, one of the richest, most economically secure countries in the world, it had it still does, enormous oil reserves. But when it became centrally planned, again, this is the whole idea behind socialism. It's centrally planned, it's centrally controlled, not an individual, but centrally planned. What happened? It devastated the private industry and redistributed the resources. So you went from a land of basically riches to a land of inflation rates that are limitless. You have an economy that's totally shattered. You've got crime rates that are the highest. In fact, the murder rate in Venezuela is one of the highest in the world. That's a fact. What about the essentials? We just went through a crisis in our country, indeed the world, where toilet paper was missing, right? I mean, we remember that. But over there, They have the same problem daily. Every hour they have that problem. So where is the government help? It's not helping. Same thing, they got blackouts that are over there causing infant deaths. So as a Catholic, these types of social poverties really can never be accepted, ever. And yet this is what the socialism has for Venezuela. So you've got Sweden, you've got Venezuela, you've got North Korea. I mean, you could go on and on and on. And every example you look at, it's a complete failure.
Yeah, so it's so the failure isn't because it's not being applied properly. The failure is because it's a wrong idea to begin with, and just like laying an uneven foundation, as you build up, bad things are going to happen, basically.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a flawed foundation, regardless of the goodness of the people that it's under. And certainly, we, as Catholics, realize that there's great people in every country, and we're to love every people, all people. And yet, at the same time, to love them is to tell the truth, and that is that socialism should not be accepted.
Yeah, very good. Well, we're chatting with Troy Guy, and his website, by the way, folks, check it out. It's discoverhischurch.com. Talk about socialism and all sorts of other isms. Are they compatible with the Christian faith? Stay tuned. More to come on the other side of the break.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tear and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Troy Guy, nuclear engineer and convert to the Catholic faith. By the way, I want to announce his website one more time, discoverhischurch.com. And for those who are just joining us, we're talking about being confronted with all these different isms, and specifically socialism, and where does it conflict with the Judeo-Christian principles. And Troy's given us a great outline of things, all sorts of stuff on this topic. Despite technical difficulties, he has persevered. And, Troy, Yeah. It's socialism is, this is how it is by design. You end up with a kind of totalistic government that necessarily suppresses Catholicism or Christianity in general.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great point you bring up, because you see, for us Catholics, I think another problem with socialism is that it is a moral threat to Catholics and Christians around the world. And I want to talk a little bit about why that would be. If we go back to some of the attractions of socialism and how it's advertised, you get this, hey, look, we get a free government-run healthcare system, right? I mean, this is good. The problem is that the government now controls what service a hospital can provide. And so, in other words, who owns what the hospital gets and does is dictated by the hospital services, who are run by the government. And so with the government-owned hospitals, remember, again, this is where the free healthcare has been touted. This decisions about moral truth and Christian healthcare really comes under attack. So you can imagine euthanasia, mandated sterilizations. What about fetal stem cell research from aborted babies, right? I mean, this is something that's very serious. And abortion just flat out. I mean, all this is going to be forced onto Christian healthcare systems, which, of course, violates our Christian faith. And I think it attacks the very freedom of life itself. And so we naturally would see the closing of the Catholic healthcare system because they're not going to perform abortions mandated under the government. So, hey, we'll just shut down. And we've seen a little bit of that. And in fact, we've seen a lot of that in socialistic, certainly communistic countries. But I think that, when you think and you discuss this idea about socialism, I think many Christians who are kind of just sitting there and not really well grounded in certain areas, or maybe they just hadn't had time to research it, somebody will inevitably come up to a Christian and say, hey, what about that old passage in, this book or that book? And one comes to my mind is Acts chapter 2, for example. And that's one of those verses that we hear that the early Christians, they had all these things in common. They sell their possessions. They give their goods to everybody. They divide them up as according to everyone that had need. Well, why is that not socialism? I mean, there's a handful of verses that sound very socialistic. But we have to go back to the definition of socialism. And I'd point out that Christians, certainly Catholics as well, do share our possessions with those in need. It's the very foundations of our faith. We give. I mean, we give a lot. But when we share our possessions, Gary, as these early Christians did, and every Bible verse you come across, we don't do so because we're forced to by the government. See, that's socialism. Rather, we love for our Lord Jesus Christ, and that's what makes us give. It's a heart changed by God, right? It's not a centralized government telling us to give up everything we earn. No, Christians give out of a changed heart for Jesus Christ, out of our own free will. Much, much different than socialism. So again, we give to the poor, but we do it because we love God out of Christian charity, where socialism, of course, forces us to give up our possessions. But I think the key here is that, in the socialistic view, you have this private property confiscation going on, but yet we see in the Bible where these early Christians never denied that they could own private property. They never did. And so I think it's important that Christians realize that the takeaway is that Jesus was not a socialist because he didn't seek to abolish private property. Remember the definition of socialism. And he never said that, hey, we have to have this centralized wealth system where we distribute it all to the command government. No. He said, hey, let's give because you yourself have received grace from me. And so you pass that on in Christian and charity love.
Yeah. Very, very good. Very important point, too. Jesus wasn't a socialist. Not only did the apostles own property, right, but also the Old Testament legislates property. It's a good that can be legislated. It's not something that, like you said, that the private property should be abolished and everything is mandated to be held in common. And I was thinking as you were saying that, just as socialism will take away initiative right, in work ethic. It also takes away virtue, too, because what we would normally do through charitable giving is grow in grace, right, and virtue by helping the poor. That's kind of ripped from us so that it's not a virtuous act. It's something that we need to do or we'll be punished.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we're commanded to do under a threat, as opposed to what Christians do is give out of a cheerful heart that's been born anew from God. I mean, that's very important. And really, the truth is that the Bible and the apostles actually affirm our God-given differences. Remember, we talked about the differences as been one of the socialistic battle cries that you can't have any differences, but St. Paul tells us that, hey, we have unity and diversity. We have unity in faith, but we certainly have diversity in our gifts, our God-given gifts. And so when the Bible says that our differences are in talents, that's our individual gifts, they're from God for his glory. And I think that's such a difference between socialism with its atheistic structure that seeks to actually suppress our God-given gifts and, again, have all the fish swim in the same direction, listening to the same tune of music. And that's certainly true for Catholics in terms of faith, but not in terms of our individual gifts. And I like what you said about work and ethic. And, let's not forget, of course, that work is biblical, right? I mean, when we look at the Old Testament or the New Testament, there's no way around that back in Genesis, Adam and Eve were told to be fruitful, to replenish the earth. And actually, he said to subdue it. In the New Testament, we're told that if a man doesn't work, well, he's not going to eat. And so there's a very divine purpose for owning land, and that's to provide for our families.
Yeah, very well put. There's so many different ways this is incompatible. And like you mentioned, the church has definitively spoke on socialism, not once, but several times. Why is it that the message hasn't gotten down to the pews?
Well, I think one of the reasons is it hasn't got to the pews is because we have not so well-informed catechesis. It's not a topic that's generally covered in depth, and sometimes we're not getting a good catechesis for other reasons. But and it sounds good. Like I mentioned at the first, I mean, free healthcare. This is great, right? And certainly those of us who are paying prices for our healthcare, we would love to have free healthcare. Not really, because it's not free. And when we consider the ramifications for having a free system, we realize that, it quickly attacks our faith in so many different areas. One of the most powerful ones is, of course, is the life of the unborn. Then you give government, they can do what they want. But the idea that Catholic faith, I think, and socialism are incompatible has been spoken from every pope. It's been passed down to every Catholic. It's all over our beliefs, our fundamental beliefs. And so really Catholic faith and socialism are just incompatible. And I think you could say that socialism is actually foreign to Christian truth. And again, the reason why is it fails to respect the dignity of the human person. It violates natural law. It redistributes the wealth, which is really immoral because it's stealing. It's taken from somebody that has that you did not have and given it to them. That's a theft. We've got socialism as aesthetic. It's got a hatred for God. Again, we go back to that isms that we began with. Socialism is made up of parts of atheism, which desires to banish religion from all society. So that's a huge part of why all the popes and all Christian leaders really have sought to educate us and say, look, socialism is not compatible with our Catholic faith at all.
Yeah.
But I think, Gary, just as we kind of close here, it's time that Catholics bear witness to this fact. It's something that we've seen the popes come out and say, look, we have to take this to the voting. The polls. We've heard, in fact, recently in the last few days of courageous priests who are standing up for the truth, right? And they're getting removed. And socialism, in my view, is just another one of those steps that Satan's taken in his arsenal to not only control our speech, of course, our freedoms and our God-given gifts, our God-given talents, because, again, all of this would be replaced by government control. And I think we can no longer allow it to exist. even a second longer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think a lot of Catholics have this fear of, church and state being separated, and that we don't want to speak out because that would be interfering in the secular realm. But actually, the way you put it, it's really that socialism is invading the religious realm. It's more of a self-protection that these things just can't be allowed, because to allow it would essentially sell us into slavery, so to speak.
Oh, that's powerful, Gary. I would just add to that, too, that the USCCB, in the Forming Consciousness pamphlet, says that, church's obligation is to participate in shaping that moral character as a requirement of our faith. And so we've seen over and over again, Pope after Pope has said, hey, certainly, it's part of our faith to go and vote our conscience. That's why we have formed consciousness. And so I think that, as we move to the polls, there's always the Pope's, 5 non-negotiables that maybe, can help form that. There's prayer. And so I think it's very important that Catholics get out and vote and realize that socialism really is incompatible to Catholic faith.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, well said. And, we have maybe about a minute left. I want you to tell people where they can go to get a hold of all your great stuff.
Well, I would just add, too, Gary, just as we're closing, that, one person can make a difference. One person can. What we're up to is there's a Call to Holiness, New York Men's Conference, October the 17th. I would encourage every man to dial in, and we'll be speaking with Dr. David Andrews and myself. So look forward to seeing you.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on board, Troy. I really appreciate it.
God bless you, Gary. God bless you, listeners. Love you all.
All right. Troy Guy, ladies and gentlemen, discoverhischurch.com. Check out his stuff. Coming up next, we have High Impact Catholic Talk coming at you with the Terry and Jesse Show. And it's time for me to turn off the dojo lights, shut down the Midwest Command Center. Thank you so much for listening. And God willing, we'll be back again next week to do this thing we call Hands-On Apologetics. Bye-bye, everybody.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.